much. It is a pleasure to be here with you all. I am a professor and director of vocal studies at Trevecca Nazarene University, and I teach private voice there as well as voice-related courses, so diction, Italian, French, German, vocal literature, vocal pedagogy. I've started a new a cappella group at Trevecca that's kind of like pentatonics, so that has been fun. And the lyric theater ensemble. So that is kind of what I do. I am currently at Brentwood Baptist Church, that little church down the street here. Travis Cottrell, obviously, is our director, but I help him with sectionals. And so typically, even though I'm a soprano, I help with the alto sectionals, and they say they love the little bits of vocal technique I'll sneak in there, and they say they feel like they've had a little mini voice lesson sometimes with just something I'll talk about. So it's helpful. Hopefully some of these techniques that I'm going to talk about will be helpful, that you can take them to your choirs and use them. So here is a quote from Robert C. White. He was a teacher at Juilliard. In the beginning there was breath, and singing was with breath, and singing was breath, and singing was breath. And all singing was made by the breath, and without breath was not any singing made that was made. So, gold star for anybody who knows that scripture reference, John 1:1, right? Hopefully that's not sacrilegious. But it is so important, and as many of you know, your people, maybe some are paid, but some are volunteers, and they're coming after a long day of work. They're coming maybe on that Wednesday night, and they are just arriving on E in their gas tanks. So I think one of the best things to do is just calm their spirits, help to calm their minds. And so breathing is one of those important ways to just have them relax. So if you want to close your eyes, I'll lead us in an exercise, in a breathing exercise. And this is called square breathing. So you're going to breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, and then we'll start the process again. So breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, then out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2. And again, breathe in for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Don't have to close your eyes, obviously, but sometimes it just helps to take away the distractions. And if you have the Apple Watch, maybe your heart rate has slowed a little bit just from doing that. Another exercise that I'm sure you've all done is the hissing or the S, letting out on that S. I would encourage you to let out on this. Does anybody know International Phonetic Alphabet? Which sound would this be? Zh, zh. That actually helps engage the core muscles a little more. So just letting out on a zh as opposed to a s. But either is helpful, but just making them aware. The straw breathing, and I have some straws we'll use a little later. I don't know if you've used them with your choirs. Maybe you use them in a voice lesson. Anybody use the straw? Yeah, some people. I find it extremely helpful because the way we breathe in and blow out through the straw is more natural than just our normal, when we think about breathing for singing, everybody's, they do that. But the straw is really helpful. When you're using the straw, I would recommend not using a coffee stirrer. Sometimes people do that. If you've ever done it, it's a lot harder. And so it's good to feel, your core muscles working, but sometimes it makes too much pressure, subglottal pressure underneath the vocal folds. So I would avoid that one. The big straws, like the smoothie straws, are the ones you might have in a water bottle. They're almost a little too big, but they provide a nice massage for your larynx. So if you have a straw like that, it just kind of gives a nice massage. But the drinking straws are probably the best for that. And then you've all done some kind of ha breathing, right? If you call, I'm at a college, so if you call across the quad to someone, hey, the muscles that you feel, those are the muscles you want to use as you're letting out, as you're phonating or letting out the sound. So I have an exercise I think I'll do later that has that. But feeling those core muscles engage is so important. So it's important to understand the process of breathing for singing. And some of you may already know this, but just wanting to make sure we're all on the same page. It's something we take for granted. We do it all the time, but it is one of the most foundational things we do for singing. This is a common issue beginning singers have, or amateur singers who have never had a lesson, which in your choirs that may be common in some cases. But having that breathing allows for a bigger sound without any extra effort at all. So doing that is good. The difference between breath support and breath control. How many of you have heard sing from the diaphragm, right? What does that mean? What on earth does that mean? So thinking about these terms often get interchanged too. So breath support is more about using your core muscles, your abdominal muscles, as you're letting out the air. The breath control is the function of the vocal folds or vocal cords. Vocal folds is more commonly used maybe today. How tightly you bring them together. So if you're singing like Billie Eilish, who has to take a breath every 2 words because she's breathing like this, it doesn't matter how big of a breath you get, you're letting out all this air, and you're not going to be able to have a good sound. So that is important. Registration, if you know some about the registers, that affects that too. Because then if you have someone singing like, I don't know, Ethel Merman or they're bringing their vocal folds together very, very tightly. So it all depends on style too. How many of you do a more traditional, more classical or liturgical music at your church? Yeah. How many of you do more of a contemporary? So, yeah, or a blend, yeah. So that's good to know. So for something, if you're singing total praise or something like that, you are going to sing with a little more, your vocal folds are going to be a little more tightly together. You're going to be singing more with a chest voice, a chest register, not quite as much as a head register. And we'll talk about registration later. That can also be a confusing concept of head voice, chest voice. What is mix? So I can tell you my thoughts about that. However, I will say, how many of you work with teens? If you work with kids or teens, yes. So for females, there is a thing called a chink. So their vocal folds are not fully developed yet. So that's why sometimes you hear teenage girls and they're breathy. That's, just anatomically, their vocal folds are not fully developed yet. So sometimes, they will overcompensate for that by really singing heavy. So just be aware as you're leading teenage girls to maybe not push the issue of singing completely, fully, clearly. Just be aware of that. Okay, looking at the actual diaphragm. I know many years ago, I thought the diaphragm was kind of here. They talk about sing from the diaphragm. The diaphragm is actually a lot higher than we think. And it separates the abdominal cavity from the chest cavity from the abdominal cavity. So it's actually a cross section here. So its lowest place is your lowest rib. If you feel your lowest rib in your rib cage, that's its bottommost place. So it's all the way up here. Your diaphragm is constantly moving when you breathe. You can't control the diaphragm. It's always going up and down. However, for singing, it goes lower than for typical breathing or speaking. Here's another fun picture. It's kind of like a dome. Some will say a parachute, but it comes down about 2 inches and goes back up. Forgive me if you've learned these things in vocal pedagogy before, but sometimes people don't know these things. So you can see the diaphragm contracts and comes down. It creates a vacuum. The lungs fill up with air. And then as you let the air out and you exhale, it comes back to its resting place. So, what'd you say?
Same as playing the trumpet.
Yes, yes. The one difference I have found is instrumentalists learn to expand really lowly, down here. So you think of your lungs are all the way up here, so that, and they breathe very quickly. You play the trumpet, so it's that low breathing. So for singing, that might not be quite as efficient or natural for singing. But yeah, if you have an instrumentalist, for sure, it's going to be different. Let me see. Here's a little, don't know how loud.
The primary muscle of respiration is the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a thin, dome-shaped layer of muscle and tendon that separates the abdominal cavity from the chest cavity.
So you don't need to see, but that's the motion. Whoops.
The primary muscle.
Yes, you already know that. So let's see. Let me find here. You've all heard with breathing, I think you've all heard you don't want clavicular breathing, right? Which means your clavicle is here. You don't want to see your shoulders rise or your chest go up. However, some people will advocate for belly breathing, but I mean a low belly breathing, a low expansion here when you're inhaling. Some will say feel it all in the back. The air's coming in your lungs, but focus all the expansion in your back. Some will say focus it in your lower ribs. You have to think too, what works for you might not work for everybody because every person's body is different. So I find with my college girls some of them who are 90 pounds soaking wet and they're, very thin, that expanding down here is very hard. So it actually helps them typically to think a little bit higher in the lower ribs. So I want to try an exercise, and if you have room, it's a little tight, come down and put your elbows on your knees. You're going to put both elbows on your knees. I'll test my balance here. So you're going to I just make my right hand kind of like a gun, and I put it up to my mouth. Obviously, you're not going to breathe quite this way for singing, but what you're going to do, you're going to suck in very quickly. You're just going to go. Yeah. Do you feel the amount of expansion? Yeah. Do it again. So you feel that. So my opinion, you should feel it all around. But I had a teacher once, a coach, who made me do that the entire lesson for my singing. And about halfway through, I was seeing stars from literally, So, but it allowed me to get a deeper breath. So you can do that if you feel like your choir is just getting shallow breaths. That's something you can try, especially, with more beginners, or it's just a way. And you can actually, as you sing an excerpt, do that. And then sing and do that for a little while. Not for too long. Make sure you're sitting. Obviously, you don't get lightheaded. Okay. Get a drink. I am in the Nashville Symphony Chorus as well, and it mentioned that. And this is a concert week, so tonight is night 9 of 10 nights at the symphony for me, because we did Amadeus last weekend. with the movie score. And then this weekend, if you're still in Nashville and you want to see a wonderful choral concert, tonight and tomorrow night we're doing, oh my goodness, the Jeremiah Symphony, Symphony No. 1 of Bernstein's. And then we're also doing Jonathan Leshnoff. Have you ever heard of him? He's a newer composer, a work he wrote in 2020 that's about the sacrifice of Isaac. So it talks about Abraham and Sarah. It has the angel coming saying you're going to have a child. Then it talks about the sacrifice of Isaac. And it's very beautiful. It's accessible. It's not too dissonant, but it is very, very challenging. So I'm dealing with singing all night for the last few nights. But if you get a chance, it will be a great concert. In my vocal pedagogy class, I like using this book, James McKinney, The Diagnosis and Correction of Vocal Faults. Did someone use that? What is it?
Who's the dean of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and how many of us were at Southwestern Baptist Seminary when James McKinney was the dean?
Okay.
Wrote that book.
Okay. Nice.
And taught the class.
Oh, wow. Very nice. I like using this book, and not to belittle my college students. It's accessible. It's easy to understand. Some of those pedagogy books are just, I mean, I can understand it, but trying to explain that to 19, 20-year-olds, it's hard. But I like he says his 4 stages of breathing. So inhalation, you're breathing in. You suspend these muscles, these core, these abdominal muscles, and then you have the phonation, the controlled exhalation, and then you have a recovery period. If you do not have the recovery period, you have all had the experience when you're nervous and you tend to hold your abs tight, this fight or flight, it's hard to recover. So that's important as well. But the main difference between breathing for singing and breathing for speaking is that suspension moment. And so the straw, I believe, is the most important for that. How many have heard of SOVT exercises? Yes, semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. Forgive me, I don't have that on a slide. So the straw is an example. Your vocal tract is semi-occluded. An M, N, it is semi-occluded. Your lip trills, those are a typical warm-up. That is a really great warm-up to do in the beginning. The lip buzz or tongue trill, if your people can do that. If people struggle to do the lip trill or the lip trill, sometimes if you lift up on your cheeks, that is a helpful way that they can. So if you struggle with it, you can lift up and it makes it a little easier. I have my students cover as they do it because you just know college germs and so, and I'm usually right here, so I don't want it, or in the studio, the small room, I don't want it all over me. So I have them cover, and it's also nice for any germophobic people you have in your group. It's just a little nicer, but those are really helpful. So here are some things, some exercises, some things you can do in your choir rehearsal. When you're engaging these abdominal muscles, some people kind of pull in, some people push out. So I tell my students different things, and I say, what works for you? Find what works for you, but you got to have some kind of engagement here. The higher you go, the more engagement you need. And when you do that in the straw, you do feel that naturally. But also posture is so key. And think, I should have a slide of this. We're all looking down at our phones. And I think I have a diagram. I can find it, but it shows the amount of pounds of pressure. And I believe when you are at your lowest place, it is 60 pounds of pressure on your neck. So you think, and then with students, they've got book bags, these big, heavy book bags. So you will find we're all like this. If you try to sing like that, if everybody tried, if you just sing la, I think that's an A, sing an A, la, la, and just start in a good place with good posture, and then let's bring our heads down. So if you start here, my goodness, the sound changes immensely. So that.
Also, they can see you when you conduct.
Yes. Yes, heads up. A typical thing too, sometimes as worship leaders, we look up to God, and you can do some of that, but you also have to be careful of that strain as well. So it's a balance, but posture is so key. However, it's hard. You don't want to constantly saying, sit up straight, sit up straight, sit up straight. So Tucker Biddlecombe, the director of Nashville Symphony Chorus, he will often say, recycle your posture. Recycle your posture. Reset your posture. You might say something like, elongate your spine, elongate your body. So that way it's a little more positive and not quite as, negative. So we're going to I have straws. Now my college students, I don't get individually wrapped ones, but these are individually wrapped. So I apologize, the plastic is kind of a little challenging to get off, but I'm just gonna grab a bunch of them. And if you wanna take one down and pass it around. Ooh, you're welcome. Ooh, sorry, I'm gonna whip those at you there. Now, fortunately, straws are cheap, but if you don't have straws, it's easy sometimes to just have people pretend they're breathing in. Let's see if I have to hide these from my cat. Anybody have a cat that just loves straws and chewing? He loves chewing on plastic. I don't know why. My goodness, we were without power for 7 days, and we made it a staycation and went downtown to a very nice hotel. Fortunately, we kind of splurged, and that was our spring break trip, sadly. But we took the cat with us, obviously, because it was about 35 degrees in our house, and then at some point it got to like 28. So we had a huge icicle in our master shower. It was like a stalagmite. If you're really curious to see, come up and I'll show it to you. But from the floor was a sheet of ice in the shower, but from the drip from above, this huge, thick icicle formed. So, but we took the cat, and oh my goodness, after about 5 days, he was just going stir crazy. But some people in the hotel, they left their cats in their house. I thought, I couldn't do that. Okay, so it's helpful if you have water. It's helpful. Now the only thing is, no one do it if you have hot coffee, but it might bubble up in your face. But if you do have a bottle of water, it's helpful too, because you can see the bubbles. You can actually see and hear the air. Otherwise, you could go and not be blowing through it. So that is a way you constantly see air going. So you can just do this breathing exercise just singing through a straw, but also in your songs that you're working on. If there is a section where it's kind of flat and you can tell the breathing's not great, that give everybody a straw and have them do it. Do a phrase 3 times through the straw and then do it naturally, and it's amazing how it will fix it. So everybody try it. Just sing la, la, la. Sing through the straw. Keep going. You feel your abs engage. Now, Good, very nice. Now go high. Yeah, do you feel your abs engage for those higher pitches? For sure. When do you feel your abdominal muscles start to engage? Just sing a note. You're blowing through the straw and singing. And you can stop and, yeah. When do you feel it start to engage? Yeah. And even sometimes, like the split second before you start to sing, you know, you feel that. I don't like to say contraction because then people are like, you don't need that much. It creates too much pressure. But you feel that engagement. And that happens the whole time you're singing. And as you get higher, it naturally, you just need more. So it's a good way to help people breathe. And I use it in my studio often. I have a bag of straws. They're cheap, but I find it's helpful. Any questions so far about anything? Like I said, might be some things you already do. Something that's helpful, Tucker Biddlecombe likes to do this. If you're singing a part where it's a long note maybe and it's going flat or it's a higher note, he will have us gently tap our abs. He said, you don't have to give me credit for this stuff. You can pretend it's your own. But he, just gentle, you know, obviously not like Tarzan or anything, but it's just a reminder to have your abdominal muscles engaged. There's a balance though. You don't want to do too much because then it creates too much pressure underneath the vocal folds. Another, like the exercise, I'm sure you've all done this before, a kind of ha, 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 ha. And if you have a good H, you feel that engagement. Let's just do a few. Here we go, and ha, 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 ha. Uh-huh. Do ho, 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 ho. Good. So for more beginning singers, you do that. For more advanced singers, that one's harder. So, yeah. But if your people are more advanced and they're bored, you know, you can do that as well. But you'll feel like the queen of the night, right? You know, that using your abs in that way. Another thing I like to do, although you have to be careful if you have an older group, they might not be able to do this as much, but I like to have people squat. And I find, has anybody done that on the high notes before? You know, if you do that. So I will do an exercise. My college students are pretty nimble, so I have them squat pretty low if they can. All they need to do is a little bit. But you thought, well, I can't do that in the service. I can't have them all. But it helps them not get into bad muscle memory habits. You know, if they reach up, how many, especially tenors, no offense, tenors, but to reach up for those high notes, by doing this, you're thinking down. It's using your core muscles just by squatting a little. The more you squat, the more you use them. But it's helping in that way, and they're not grabbing here. They're not reaching up. Also, for those high notes, you got to think, go for it. I have a girl singing, one of my students, I shouldn't say girl, singing Best of All Possible Worlds from Candide. And at the end, there's a high D, and right now, she's kind of going, you know, she's scared of it. And I'm like, you got to go for it. You just, you know, so I didn't warm up. I shouldn't have done that. But I said, you got to get a good breath. I know you have this note, but you got to go for it. And so I'm having her, but squat before the high note and not on it. So let's try it. If you're able, have some audience participation. If you're able, what you're going to do, we're just going to do this exercise. Now, if you have bad knees or something, you don't have to do it or just go like this. If you're more able, you can squat a little more, but we're going to squat on the held note. So, very nice. I could tell as choir directors, that sounds amazing. And yeah, and stay down for the 9. So 7, 8, 9. No. Let's keep doing a few more. Here we go. And yeah, very nice. So that's a way. You can sit down. I will have students sometimes say, "Can I squat on this?" I say, "Yes, I will allow you." Now, not in the performance, but just make sure people don't do this as they squat. Think of almost like a plie. The other thing, this might be harder to do depending on how big your choir is or, the space. What'd you say? How old. Yes, and how old. But even, I don't want to break this. So if you've done the wall sits before, those are very helpful. So if you're working with someone one-on-one, I had 20 students at Brentwood Baptist in our worship academy, and several of them were older people in the choir. And just very low. Make sure your knees aren't going past your toes. But just that, it helps with posture. It helps keep shoulders down and back. However, you don't want the head touching. Keep the chin level. But that forces them to breathe in a way that's not shallow or as shallow. And it also is engaging your core muscles. Now for my college students, if they've, like my female who's got that high D, I will make her squat low, because I know she's a runner, she's athletic, but squat really low for that. Just so she's not building bad muscle memory, or muscle memory that's not helpful. I'll say that. Now, let's see, how much time do I have? Just a little bit, and I want to leave time if there's any time for questions at the end. The last thing, talking about expressive singing. So when you want a crescendo or a decrescendo, sometimes the soft singing is harder than the loud singing to keep it in tune. So you really have to engage these muscles for that. Let me find. And create those crescendos and decrescendos with your abdominal muscles. I think that's more helpful. Otherwise, sometimes it comes from here. They're trying to make something happen, and it gives tension. Man, we've got some parts in this piece tonight that are pianissimo, and they're a cappella. And at the end, it's really hard not to just go, and in the rehearsals, we do that. And tonight and tomorrow are actually being recorded. It will be a live recording of that work as well. But yeah, it takes a lot of energy to do it well. And the straw is helpful for that as well. Placement is important as well. Now, I'll give a disclaimer. Some voice teachers, some people do not like talking about placement. They'll say it's subjective. Your vocal folds are making the sound. And I'm going to show a video this afternoon that I don't know if you were in here yet. It's a group of 4 singers, and they're singing Palestrina or some kind of old school Renaissance. It has about the vocal cords singing polyphony, so I thought that would be appropriate. But it shows soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and they do the stroboscopy, and they do it while they're singing. So you can watch their vocal folds in real time, what they're doing. But placement is something that's kind of subjective. So the voice is being made here, your notes are being made here, but placement, you can place something in your nose, you can kind of place something in your throat. Oh, that's tiring. And you might have some people that they just want to belt everything in chest voice and everything is stuck here, and that's when they're going to lose their voice. So we have 5 Easter services at Brentwood Baptist, 2 on Saturday and 3 on Sunday morning. And you know, if someone is singing like that, it's just, you'll be dead. So placement is something, I say a placement that's forward. I don't say towards the mask, because sometimes it can kind of make things nasal, but kind of more here towards your front teeth. And some people don't like talking about it because it's subjective. However, I have found it helpful, and I found a lot of my students have found it helpful. If it's not helpful for them or they're just not getting it, I usually just let it go. But 9 times out of 10, most of them, it's extremely helpful, especially if you have more commercial music or, you know, if you're doing a blend, having that more forward placement helps. But even for the classical stuff, I will have my students do this, thinking about high, soft palate, right? So space inside the mouth, but also I have them put a hand here. And it's a lot to think about at once, but thinking about the high, soft palate in the space, but also at the same time thinking about forward placement. And you will find, all of a sudden there's all this sound. So I'll talk about that a little more in the afternoon when we talk about resonance. So yeah. The other thing that I will say, what can impede the breath flow? Tension. Tension. How many of us, you hold your tension in your neck or your shoulders? There'll be a student like this and I'll just be boop, boop, tap, and they're like, oh. We don't even realize how much we hold tension in our jaw, some of us, when you're focusing on the computer or looking at your phone. And so tension really impedes the breath flow. So it's, you know, posture and tension kind of go hand in hand. But things like the tongue, if the tongue is pulling back in the mouth, like on a high E or an A, that impedes the breath flow. So you can have your people, if you sense that at all, sing with their tongue sticking out over their mouths. And maybe for that high note, it might help get rid of any of that tension. Some of those things are harder to see when you have a large group. I don't know if any of you have like a choir of 100. Does anybody have a choir that big? Yeah. So it's a little harder to tell. But so that's one of those things to make sure there's not tension. The best cure for tension is movement. So that too, the squat, I'll have them move some. They feel silly, but you know, just moving some and reminding people, loosen up, loosen up. Oh, occasionally have them sigh down to relax their vocal folds. Oh, and just move. And you'll be amazed at how much it frees up the sound. So those are some things as far as breathing. Hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully maybe there's something you didn't know or it will help. So any questions about? Yes.
Just as a point of information, I know you can buy stainless steel straws for a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, especially
wash
this
them.
line, you know,
Reuse
but Amazon has them like 5 in a box for $7.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're the right size, they're about that long.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
just
and
for personal, if you want to start doing that on your own.
Yes.
You know, they're cheap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of them, they're like a little necklace.
Yeah, well, they have ones too. You can adjust it.
That's right,
You can
yeah.
adjust the resistance on it.
Yeah.
But like I said, you have to
A
be
lot.
careful because when you're doing a lot of resistance, like with the coffee stir, you'll find sometimes so much pressure builds up underneath the vocal folds that it makes them tight. So with everything, there's balance. Yeah, you want to use these core muscles, but not so much that you have that pressure underneath. So you're overachievers, and your choirs might be like, you know, you don't want that. That's why sometimes the gentle taps or the straw is gentle chord. The squats, it's gentle. I had some teachers will say, and no offense to anybody, pull up and in on the belly button. And it did give the singer a big, big sound, but one, they ran out of air in no time because it was pushing so much air out, and also two, you could see the tension building up. But to my college students, they're like, ooh, that sounds impressive, that's big. So, you have to find a balance. But yeah, so they're relatively cheap. Any other questions? I know it's almost 11:15. So if you think of anything, feel free to come and talk to me. So thank you so much.